Jackson Smith-Njigba, Brian Thomas Jr., Ladd McConkey, Jameson Williams, Cortland Sutton. If you drafted any of those guys last season, you spent a pick on somebody outside the top 40 wide receivers. But they returned huge value, finishing with inside the top 20 wide receivers. So today, I think I need to get rid of this hat and put a different hat on because we need to start finding some sleepers that are buried treasure. Who do Pirates hate more than anybody else? It's Arthur Smith, even more than us here at the Fantasy Headliners. But today we are going to be taking a look at 5 wide receivers that are deep sleepers that could end up being buried treasure. And maybe they don't finish as top 12 wide receivers, but they could return some huge value for your fantasy lineups. And I really think we need to kick this video off by talking about Rome Odunze. Everybody is high on the Chicago Bears offense. They feel like Ben Johnson is going to make huge changes with Caleb Williams and all the weapons that they have there, and I don't completely disagree with that. But if this offense is going to get better, you got to think that Rome Odunze is going to have a big part of that. Could he be the new Jameson Williams for Ben Johnson? Rome Odunze isn't as fast as Williams, but he is a deep play threat. Obviously, we want to see the offense as a whole in Chicago get way better, but the volume for Rome Odunze needs to be there, and Keenan Allen heading to free agency and not returning will open 121 targets for Rome Odunze and everybody else to see their volume increase. Now, over on X, Matt Harmon did a podcast recently where he talked about Rome Odunze, and one of the stats that got brought up is that last year, Rome Odunze ran 144 routes where he didn't even see a target. 144 times, Rome Odunze ran a route for absolutely no reason. We want to see that get a whole lot better in 2025, and hopefully Ben Johnson can scheme something up to get Rome Odunze open. Now, maybe you forget, but a couple of years ago, he was considered an elite talent at the University of Washington. 167 receptions, 2,875 receiving yards, and 20 receiving touchdowns over his last 2 years in college. I already mentioned the deep playability, and really that being the area in which he can help this offense grow and where he can really make an impact. In 2023, his last year at Washington, he did exactly that. He had 23 deep catches and 783 deep receiving yards to lead the NCAA that season. And again, a deep catch or a deep receiving yards comes on targets of 20 or more yards down the field. He was being targeted as that deep play threat in Washington's offense. But not only that, the contested catch ability. Also during his final year, he caught 21 of 28 contested catch opportunities. Rome Odunze is a freak against man coverage. It is hard to stay one-on-one with this guy. His final year in 2023 at Washington, he ranked in the 100th percentile when it came to going up against man coverage. His success rate against man coverage was off the charts. And going up against an offense like the Chicago Bears, Rome Odunze will hopefully see a lot of one-on-one opportunities. Of course, you'll have DJ Moore, you'll have Cole Kmet, you'll have Colston Loveland, DeAndre Swift out of the backfield. There will be a lot of people to pay attention to. But before I talk about the other 4 guys, let's break down the scenario overall of what it takes to become a breakout wide receiver using Rome Odunze as our test subject. Now, if we're looking for just a floor, we could be looking at 55 receptions, 700 receiving yards, and 4 receiving touchdowns. Very similar to what he did last season. That's going to make you a wide receiver 3. It's going to put you in towards the back end of wide receiver 3 status. So those are the type of numbers that could just get you into the top 36 wide receivers. But we're not just drafting these guys to be fringe wide receiver 3s. We want a little bit more upside than that. So what's more of a growth? What is a growth path that we could see with a guy like Rome Odunze heading into 2025? Well, if you want to become a low-end wide receiver too, we could see about 70 receptions, 900 receiving yards, and 8 touchdowns. And given where Rome Odunze was last year, with the numbers you see as a floor, that's a respectable growth pattern in an offense that realistically should be a whole lot better. Now, that type of growth right there would be very similar to the value that we found last year in Courtland Sutton and Jameson Williams, and what those guys did to go from being drafted outside the top 40 wide receivers to giving us wide receiver 2 numbers. But what if we want a little bit more upside? What if we're looking for Jackson Smith-Njigba, Ladd McConkey? What if we're looking for Brian Thomas Jr.? Well, if we want those type of numbers, then that's what the ceiling is going to be. 80 receptions, 1,000 receiving yards, 1,088 to be exact, 10 touchdowns is going to make you about a low-end wide receiver 1. So if you're looking at wide receivers and trying to find a sleeper or buried treasure like I am today, these are the baseline numbers that you want to start looking at to realistically figure out where somebody could end up landing. If you draft somebody and you don't think they can hit their growth or their ceiling, then unfortunately, maybe they're not worth it. But let's stay in the same division and go with Matthew Golden for the Green Bay Packers. Right now, he's being drafted as the wide receiver 46 with a 107.3 ADP. Matthew Golden, I have talked about him all offseason long, and it is shocking to me that he is still being drafted behind Jayden Reed. Now, speaking of Jayden Reed, it's his inconsistencies along with his teammates that led the Green Bay Packers to drafting a wide receiver in the first round for the first time since 2012. Jayden Reed, who finished tied for second, Dontavian Wicks, who finished tied for 8th, and Romeo Doubs, who finished tied for 28th, combined for 23 drops last season on only 219 targets. They were absolutely the face of inconsistency at the wide receiver position. They just couldn't hold on to the football. And if you're looking for a little reference, Jamar Chase had 10 drops last season on 171 targets. And Matthew Golden is really exactly what this offense needs. A guy that can stretch the field and make big plays for Jordan Love. And he showcased that at the Combine, running a 4.29 40 and a 1.49 yard split, both fastest among wide receivers. Now, I will admit, one of the knocks that a lot of people will have on Matthew Golden is just his lack of overall volume in college. But there's still some numbers that pop out to me that make me overlook things like that. One of those things being his 83.3% contested win rate in 2024. He's a guy that if you get man-on-man coverage, he's going to win it quite often. But outside of that, his performances at the end of 2024 showcase a big-time playmaker that shows up in big games. 162 receiving yards in the conference championship, 149 receiving yards in the Peach Bowl. I'm all in on Matthew Golden, so much in fact that over on Underdog right now, he has 3 season-long pick'ems that I'm smashing higher on, and I'm not even going to sweat it. And if you want to play those pick'ems along with me, plus get a free 2025 Fantasy Headliners Draft Guide, go download the Underdog app. All you need to do is make a $10 deposit using code word headliners. You're going to get a deposit bonus, and when you play your first contest, you can do a best ball draft, you can do season-long pick'ems, whatever you want. Once you complete your first part of that activity over there on Underdog, we're going to send you a free 2025 Fantasy Football Draft Guide. Don't forget, code word headliners, $10 deposit, play your first contest, get a free draft guide. Let's make our way back to a veteran that I really feel like can make an impact on his team this year, and it's Marquise Brown. He didn't get a chance last year. He was injured basically the entire season. And even though Xavier Worthy is a speed demon field stretcher, I can see Marquise Brown having a role in 2025 that gives us really good fantasy value. Now, he did miss the first 15 games of 2024, but once he came back at the end of the regular season and the playoffs, he had 28 targets in 5 games after that. And once he got his legs under him at the end of the season, when it came playoff time, he played at least 65% of all the snaps in each of their 3 playoff games. And there's going to be opportunity for him because there's 108 vacated targets from last season that DeAndre Hopkins, Samaje Perine, and Mecole Hardman leave behind now that they're with new teams. And it's going to be really interesting to see if Travis Kelce can land 133 targets like he did last season, which led the team. He's going to be 36 years old this year. Do we think a 36-year-old tight end is going to get 133 targets once again? It definitely is possible, but Marquise Brown, especially without knowing exactly how much time Rashee Rice may miss to a suspension, could end up being buried treasure that absolutely explodes and fills your bank. Kyle Williams is going to be that ruby that's at the bottom of the chest. You open it up, you see all the gold on top, and then at the very bottom is this really dirty ruby, and you don't really think it's all that much, but it ends up being absolutely priceless. Kyle Williams could end up fitting inside this New England offense very well. And I will say, I fell for Javon Baker last year in the New England offense. Clearly that didn't work out. But Kyle Williams is going to end up filling that deep threat role that the Patriots absolutely need to exploit more often, and that Drake may feel more comfortable exploiting now that he's in year 2. Kyle Williams is being drafted as the wide receiver 62, 171st overall. New England lacks that deep threat, and when you take a look at their roster, there isn't anyone on there that really can fill it as well as Kyle Williams. I mean, Stephon Diggs is going to be back at some point this year at 100%. But when will that be? And Stephon Diggs isn't a true field stretcher. He's going to win in a lot of other areas. But then you've got Demario Douglas, nope, short yardage guy. Hunter Henry, nope, short yardage guy. Kayshon Boutte, not really a deep threat, more of a red zone threat. And Kendrick Bourne. And Kendrick Bourne, again, is one of those guys that's more in the intermediate portion of the field. And Kyle Williams showcased that deep play ability at Washington State last season. He caught 14 of 24 deep passes. Again, those are targets 20 or more yards down the field. He had 454 yards and 6 touchdowns on those targets. And since 2020, there have only been 3 wide receivers with the New England Patriots to hit 800 receiving yards. So clearly the answer to their problems isn't on the roster. Stephon Diggs could be a help towards figuring things out, absolutely, but he's not the deep threat role that Kyle Williams could end up playing. And when you have weapons like this all over the middle of the field, Josh McDaniels, for as crappy as he is as a head coach, he's not that bad of an offensive coordinator. Being back home in New England, he should be able to find a way to exploit Kyle Williams and win some one-on-one matchups down the field against man coverage. Kyle Williams may not end up reaching a whole lot of consistency this season, but I absolutely could see him having some pretty big games and scoring a few big touchdowns as well. This one you're probably going to shake your head at the most, and this one you will probably disagree with the most. But I've got a really compelling argument for Quentin Johnston. Now, Mike Williams announced his retirement, and he was previously coming back to the Los Angeles Chargers. So he may have been able to fill into that role that Quentin Johnston would be filling in as the ex-receiver on the outside. But I really think that Quentin Johnston still has something untapped that this offense has not figured out. Johnston scored 8 receiving touchdowns in 2024. That is nothing to shake your head at. In fact, if you remember the numbers that we talked about back at the beginning of the video, that's the baseline for growth right there. We talked about 8 touchdowns. Now he just needs some other things to come into play. And a lot can be said about Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh and how they are guys that are going to pound the football and the offense just feels bland. But Marquise Brown, when he had Greg Roman as his offensive coordinator back in 2021, he had a 1,000 receiving yard season as the main guy that was stretching the field. And also, I don't think a whole lot of people realize that Johnston was second on the team with 94 targets last season. And now Josh Palmer is gone, which vacates 65 more targets from last year. So it's conceivable if Quentin Johnston stays healthy, he could see over 100 targets. Now, he saw a significant jump in most of his stats from 2023 when he was a rookie to 2024. A few specific stats: drop percentage. He dropped the ball 11.9% of the time back in 2023. He improved that to 6.3 in 2024. Also, targets per route run. In 2023, it was at 15.6%. In 2024, it was at 21.7%. Finally, contested catch rate. In 2023, his contested catch rate as a rookie was only 40%. Last year, he improved it to 54.5%. Now, Quentin Johnston was not a draft pick by the Jim Harbaugh era Chargers, but Jim Harbaugh has seen Quentin Johnston firsthand. And as a Michigan fan, this game still hurts, but he tore them apart back in 2023 in the first round of the national championship. All of these wide receivers could end up being buried treasure sleepers in 2025 that could help you win your fantasy football leagues. But I can promise you one thing: I don't think you'll see many of these wide receivers running a Pirates' favorite football play, the bootleg. Headliner Nation, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.